Anthony, I heard through the grapevine that you had a near death experience. So I emailed you about it and you said, yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. So where do you want to begin?
Yeah, it's the summer of last year, 2025 now. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We're January 2nd here. And yeah, it was around May 16th. It was right after AMN. It was a week or so after AMN. I have asthma, but it was recently diagnosed in 2024. Actually, I was diagnosed in California at a J. Abraham, almost said concert, but J. Abraham conference. I had an episode there where it led to cough syncope. So if you have bronchitis or a cold of any kind and asthma, and you have an asthma attack, it can lead to you just your airways are constricting, your lungs aren't working properly, you pass out. I did finish the conference with him though, and Jay is a genius. So I went the next day, but I went to the hospital and they said, no, this is definitely asthma. I had never been diagnosed before. So during the summer of 2025, I had bronchitis, pneumonia. It turns out I have allergies too. So, lawn care landscape guy, which
Wow.
I'm not in the field, but I've developed some allergies over the years. So I have to take medicine for that now. But it was untreated allergies and untreated asthma. Because when I was diagnosed in California, my primary doctor in Indiana said, "There's no way, you've ran marathons and mini marathons, you know, and I've been training again too with running, and there's no way you have asthma. What's going on here?" But it turns out I do, and it was untreated. So, like I said, I had bronchitis, pneumonia, untreated asthma, and untreated allergies, all four things lined up at the same time. And I had 40 of these episodes. I had to go to the ER multiple times where what happens, you start coughing, your airways are constricted from the asthma, your lungs aren't, okay from pneumonia and bronchitis. And I would pass out and start shaking where it looks like you're dying. Well, during one of those episodes, I had a near death experience and was with Jesus. And it felt more real than this reality. It didn't feel like a dream at all. And if it was a dream, because you never know. If it was a dream, okay, fine, but it was nothing like any other dream I had, and it felt more real than this reality that we're in. And it was just absolutely profound, the most
So, so,
peaceful
so
thing.
take us, step me
Yeah.
through it. So I don't know, you're laying on the floor or something, and then what?
Yeah, because I would go unconscious. So you lose track of time completely. Like you don't even remember what's going on. And so when I was unconscious, yeah, I had that experience with Jesus, and so I was holding his left hand, and it was a circle of other people, and we were all holding hands, and that's all. No words were spoken, but it was the most profound peace that I've ever experienced. Like the most peaceful experience I've ever had here. It was a thousand times that. It was just the most amazing thing. And then when I woke up, I was mad because I wanted to stay there. So think
Wow.
about that. But then as I finally came to, you know, I have I'm married with two sons and I want to be here. But my first reaction was, oh man, let me go back there.
And was there any sense of time, like how long this was, or like was it like a 5 second holding hands in a circle, or is it like how would you explain time?
Oh, that is a great question. There wasn't really time though. It was almost like time didn't exist there, and there was no negative emotion of any kind. It was just pure serenity. I don't, that's the best way I could describe it. And I couldn't really perceive time. Yeah, really interesting. And and this is from someone I was agnostic for a few years. Like I'm not one of those that's saying, "Oh my gosh, I need to make everyone around me believe because I had this experience. I have tons of empathy for anyone that doesn't. But after I have an experience like that, basically what I tell my friends, because I have a lot of family, a lot of friends and colleagues that believers, and they'll kind of ask me about it because these are people I'm very close with. So I'm not going to lie to them about an experience I had. I said, if you would have had the same experience, you'd believe too, is what I'm kind
Yeah.
of, I think most people would, maybe not everyone. Maybe some people would say, yeah, it's probably just a crazy dream, whatever. But the experience was just so profound. I couldn't, and I'm a believer and was baptized earlier this year before that happened. So, which I found kind of strange with the timing. It was like I was just baptized a few months before that.
So how did you know it was Jesus?
There's no words. I was just with how you'd pictured how Jesus looks, right? Like
So
that's what I
was
was
it the
with.
way he looked, or
Yeah.
like what was it like to know that? Like, I know that when I have dreams, and you're not really talking about a dream, but I'm just trying to make it an analogy here. When I have dreams, I know certain things that nobody told me, that there's just a context. Was it like that?
Yeah, it was just you just know. That's it. Yeah. It wasn't a no words were spoken at all. But it was pure love and grace. And yeah, grace was a big one. Like I said, there's really no negative emotions, but you know you're there by the grace of God in that situation. That's how I felt in that scenario with my experience. And what did Jesus look like in this? He looked like how I would normally picture how the normal depiction of him. So, you know, I'm not sure how that would go, like how that's perceived, because who knows at that point? Is it if you when you go there, is it more of a presence? Do people actually have? Is there a physical form? In this case, there was. So I guess you could argue, hey, is that just your mind because you've seen pictures of Jesus growing up, right?
Yeah.
So, and your mind wants to perceive Jesus that way. You could argue that. I mean,
Well, I'm not so interested in things you could argue about so much as I'm just curious about how did you know what you knew and what was it like to know that?
oh,
And,
it's like a download. Like you just know every, yeah, it's just all there now.
and what was your perception of the other people that were around you? Did you
Oh, it's
pick up
just
anything?
beautiful. Just pure beauty. Yeah, it's just amazing.
So what were they like more beautiful than they would be if they lived here? Or were they perfect versions of themselves? Who were they?
Yeah, well, I just no one I knew. Yeah, everyone was glowing like it was a bright light. Everyone was emitting this light energy.
What were they wearing?
I don't think anything like it was surrounded by light, so I
Huh?
couldn't see any clothes. Like
Huh?
it was just beings, like light beings almost.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't like the new dunks or something.
So what else did you know or download, or did anything happen?
So since then, I have had a very healthy sense of detachment in a really good way of what's going on in this reality with physical belongings, not being as attached to material things. They're great. That's fine. We all need food, water, shelter, clothing. But I have wanted to share even more with those around me than I already was through the business and with my family since that experience. It's in that moment, that's all you have. No material things matter when you're dying. I wasn't concerned about anything else other than being with Jesus at that moment. So when I think back to that, it makes me not as attached to what's going on. Of course, I'm still going to enjoy my time here and I want to do well and all that's fine, but it's just a certain, since that experience, I've had a certain detachment in a very healthy way.
So tell me the difference before and after. What's attachment and what's disattachment?
When I was writing my goals before, I would get so attached to those goals that I would do and like do anything and sacrifice anything to make, let's make it happen. Not anything. I mean, I always want to have morals and go about things the right way and take care of people. But maybe I'd sacrifice my health or sleep or time with family just to, really go being way too attached to a goal where it almost just consumes you. And now I have this, hey, in its own perfect time, if it works out, I have more of a Lord willing attitude about things. It's not, oh, I'm just going to make it happen, even if I have, you know, for example, what if I could fire 10 staff members and have a 25% profit margin, but that would require me to work 17 hours a day? I'm not interested. Or I could keep them and they could have a job for themselves and their families. And we have a 12% margin. What one would I pick? I'm picking that with the 12% margin because I'm not just so endlessly attached
Yeah.
that I'm gonna do something like that or do something to someone else's life. Like it's not just profit driven. It's the ever since that experience I've had almost every day we talk about servant leadership now.
Mm.
It's like our core now. And before we talked about it a little bit and we talked about, Jay Abraham's strategy of preeminence, which I love, but I mean, we're all in on servant leadership all across the board. So
So how is your personal spiritual space or your spiritual experience different after the near death experience? Like is praying different? Is meditating different? Is church different?
yeah, I feel like I can feel Jesus in my heart and soul all the time now. Whereas before that would kind of come and go. Now it's almost 24/7.
And what is it like to feel that? Like right now, what does that feel like?
I can feel it like in my chest, like, and it's really a great feeling. I don't know if you ever felt that. Have you ever felt the presence of Jesus?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, like and you can feel it almost in your gut, in a way, in your chest.
And how does that change the way that you show up in a conversation?
I just want to be accepting and have grace and not have. I'm not as judgmental as I was with people who didn't believe. I was kind of rude before, and I don't want to be like I don't have that desire to be rude to someone if they don't believe whatsoever. I like to show people grace way more than before. And this whole math thing that I was working on, and this wasn't even my chat GPT, it was just the standard one that you go to. And talking about the mathematics of it all, I just find really interesting. But yeah, when I show up to a conversation, it's definitely more centered around grace and understanding and not being judgmental because the stereotype is, you know, a lot of people don't even, that I talk to at least, don't even want to go down that path because they feel judged if they go to a church, a traditional church or whatever. And that's the opposite of how I feel. Like I don't feel judgmental to someone if they don't believe or if they're not behaving well or whatever. And I have more grace for myself now too. It is frustrating though, because I don't want to be bad at all. Like I just want to be without sin in a certain way, but it's like that's not going away. And sometimes I still have fun and might say inappropriate words and things like that, but I have this thing where I really don't want to as much as I did before. Like it's not as enjoyable. I like to be centered and to do the right thing and to take care of those around me. So, and it is a little frustrating when that maybe that's not happening. But again, I still have more grace than I did before for myself and others, I think.
When you first had this near death experience, Was it hard to put it into words, and did it feel like as soon as I try to explain this to somebody, it's going to reduce it to less than what it was?
Yeah.
Was that feeling ever there?
Yeah. And there's also the risk of, like, even in this chat with you, you can just be perceived as crazy, and
Yep.
it can be bad for your reputation, anything like that. But at the same time, I still think it's something worth sharing because it felt like such a real experience. For me, it's such a real experience. And I really feel like if anyone else had that experience, they would be saying the same things and feeling the same way. I think most people would, maybe not everyone. So, yeah,
So, how is your perception of reality different than it was before May?
I'm just so grateful for every moment.
Were
Um,
you not before?
no,
Mm,
no, there's just this, there was more chasing going on before. I'm still grateful for what we had, but it's always like, what's the next? Because you can get consumed by this entrepreneur thing. It can just consume your whole life. What I really like about you is that it didn't do that to you. And you're one of the rare few, I think, of people who have made it as far as you have without totally getting consumed by it. You still wrote Evolution 2.0. You're still exploring all these other things, Renaissance time, New Renaissance, Predict RX, which, you're still going into cancer research, all these things. And you didn't let it do that. It can be so easy to get consumed by making money, especially when you're doing really, really well too. I mean, it can go both ways, but when you're doing well and you have a framework where you can just keep growing, you can just get so consumed by that where you don't really live your life. I did for a couple years there. And once I started working with you, Perry, I started to less, but it was still, even when we'd go on a trip or a vacation, or if I'm going to spend some quality time with some of our staff members, there was still an element there that was, I almost forgot how to sit down and enjoy a football game or enjoy time
mm,
with the family because
yeah.
it was like this 24/7,
Yep.
let's make more, we got to make more, we got to,
Yep.
come on.
Oh,
So,
and plus there's also a running from the bear version of that. If you're not successful and you're trying to pay the bills and you're trying to make the thing happen, you can
yes,
be completely consumed with just keeping the creditors at bay or trying to prevent a 1-star Google review or like whatever bad stuff is going on. And so it can
yes.
go both directions. It's not just the super successful people that struggle with that.
Yeah, that's true too. And that's why that inner work, I've spent way more time on inner work than I ever would have before. I work with Dr. George Pratt, and he's a clinical psychologist and a hypnotherapist, and working on limiting beliefs. And just spending time with you in Roundtable and Amen, just getting around other people that have already had a company located in 7 different states or 10 different states. Like I've told you before, it normalizes that and you get around that. And that also can dissolve some of those limiting beliefs. But I've been doing more inner work. It's the more inner work we do, the more results we'll see in the outside world, it seems so far. But I was less willing to do that inner work. I almost had to be forced. And that's why I would force myself to go to every roundtable and AMN meeting because at least if I go to those meetings, I'll do it. I'm going to do the inner work if I go. I always said, I think the last AMN meeting when I went back in May, I said it was probably the equivalent or even better of reading 20 or 30 phenomenal business books just from the immersion of the experience, you know? And yeah, it's working on the inner. I'm more willing to do that. And you said, if we were in a circumstance where we're running, do you say running from the bear? That's a
Yeah.
good. Uh, I wouldn't even do it. I would say, well, if this isn't working, then I'm not that attached. I'm just not. And I've had
Mm,
that with some other team members and maybe some clients where I would rather peacefully I'm more comfortable peacefully parting ways with people and things that are taking away from inner peace.
Mm.
It's not like being so attached to, yeah, that client is great. They pay you so much, but they're rude to you and mean all the time, and they're rude to your staff. And fine, I'm totally comfortable making less then if that means more peace of mind. If it's a running from the bear situation, maybe we start another business or try something different. But I'm not interested in doing the same thing and chasing. I'm sure you've experienced some of these things too, with yourself and other clients. So, but there is more serenity and peace of mind. I'm more interested in peace of mind and wisdom and health and all those other things than I was before.
I've had maybe 6 people tell me about their near death experiences.
Okay.
Um, and they do tend to kind of have a similarity. Like they all describe sensing a reality this seems more concrete than the normal reality that they come from. When I was in 6th grade, I had a Sunday school teacher who almost died in childbirth, and she floated above her body, and she saw everything that was going on in the operating room, and then she came back into her body, and she could describe the conversation, like she was allegedly under anesthesia and all the rest of it, and almost dead, but like could clearly and this kind of stuff has been extensively studied, by the way. It's kind of like what I've discovered is that if people feel safe in telling a story and you ask them if they've ever had something happen like this, there's a surprising number of people who will have, it might not be a near death experience, it might be some completely different other thing, but they will tell you things that aren't supposed to happen, or that,
Mm.
the experts would tell you are not possible. And I know there's websites where you can go research near death experiences to your heart's content, and there's thousands of them. And then I also, years ago, I also read a book, and it was kind of like the dark side of near death experiences. It was called To Hell and Back,
Mm.
and it was written by a heart surgeon.
Oh.
And he was in a very interesting position because he does cardiac work every day, and because people in all kinds of health situations come to him. He started noticing that frequently when people's hearts stopped, and their body would stop, and they would go into clinical death for some number of seconds, and then his job as the heart guy was to bring them back, get their heart started again. He noticed frequently people would come back, and they either had a sublime experience like you did, or they had a horrifying experience. Sometimes they'd be thrashing around like, no, like, don't let me go back there. Like, get me out of there.
Mm.
And so in his book, he decided to make a scientific experiment out of it. And he started logging these. And when they would happen, he would record what happened, and he would follow up with the patient. And he found several categories of people and how these things would go. He found that many times they would completely forget about it after a day or two.
Mm.
It would get wiped, kind of like a dream. Like maybe you can remember last night's dream, but 2 months from now you wouldn't be able to remember it. And then he started categorizing the people as how how many of these people changed their life because of the experience. Like, and so he found that a certain percentage of people, they would have this unpleasant experience, and the message that they got from the experience was that they were on the wrong road. They were relating to God in a bad way. They were not being honest with themselves about their shortcomings, and that they were in denial. And what he found with some people is that they made radical changes in their lifestyle, in their beliefs, and their ways of relating. And so, as best he could, he turned it into kind of like a scientific study of how these experiences affect people. And it's been years since I read the book, and you could go, I'm sure it's on Amazon. You can go find it. Like I said, it was called To Hell and Back by Maurice Rawlings. But kind of going back to the other side of the equation, there are a lot of these near-death experiences that people have. There's a really interesting book. I'll have to think of the title. It was written by a boy in Nebraska
Mm.
who he died for a period of time. It's a very famous book. It's yellow. You can Google around, you would easily find this. But one of the things that really stood out about this book was that he went into the afterlife, and he was there for some period of time, and he was able to prove that he knew things that you weren't supposed to know. Because, for example, a year later, his mom was sorting some pictures in the attic, and he knew exactly who some of these people were. And
Mm.
they had died before he was alive. He had never met them. The family had never discussed them. I believe he came back from his near death experience and told his parent that they had had a miscarriage, and that he had met his older sister
Oh,
in the afterlife. And so, like I said, these things are actually not uncommon. And people who have these experiences, when they remember and own them, my observation is it changes the way they live their life. And like I said, with this book, that was the doctor's criteria of whether he was going to take one of these things seriously. He was like, well, this happens a lot, but most of the time the person forgets about it and they just go on. And so it's really easy to dismiss that, like, well, maybe that was just a dream or a hallucination or something like that. But if it materially changed the direction of their life and the way that they relate to their spouse and their family, the way that they do their job, the way they handle their morals, then I'm going to take it seriously. And so I think this is really fascinating, and it's a deep rabbit hole. And so did this send you, like, did you start wanting to investigate or inquire, or like, how did this change your curiosity, and what conversations started happening that you wouldn't have ever had?
I would start sharing it with people. First of all, I know consciously, like obviously logically, there's a certain percentage of people that will perceive you as either lying, crazy, whatever. And my answer to that is, well, I don't have anything to gain from it. Actually, I have more to lose by
Right.
talking about it because of that.
Right.
So there's nothing to gain other than uh, I just wonder if how other people feel about Jesus. Like I'll actually initiate conversations about Jesus now where I was more shy before. I wouldn't ask people. I don't, because I don't want to be offensive to people in that regard. And I really don't. Uh, but I am curious. So I like one day I came to our shop and I asked everybody point blank. I mean, I started doing this to customers. I wouldn't say I recommend it, but it's just, I felt compelled to, right? Like, and
Yeah.
I'm just asking people if they believe in Jesus and talking about it all the time. And I'm more comfortable. But yeah, I don't know if I'd recommend it, but to my surprise, a very high percentage of the time, probably 90% plus, if I bring it up in a way that's respectful, I've gotten more people that are like, you know what? Yeah, I believe. Yeah, or I did, or yeah, they actually open up about it. I've only had one person get kind of offended, and they said that's kind of a personal question, and I just said, well, at that moment, that was still, it was, I was a few weeks out, and I said, I don't think it is. I don't think it's personal at all. I think Jesus is right here. And he's just like, all right, man. But other than that, I asked all my staff one day, and I found out it's like 93% of our staff are believers. I didn't know that.
Huh,
I thought it was 50. I had
huh.
no idea. So I'm asking then I'm seeing, oh my gosh, God is at play in my life all the time. So many of our staff members, my family, friends, and I'm like surrounded by Jesus all the time. With some of our senior leaders are big believers. I didn't realize they were, but if I ask, they're like, "Oh, well, now they're quoting scripture," and I'm not even one of those that's great at quoting scripture at all.
Hmm.
I just believe. I started developing that relationship, and I could feel a different presence, and it helped with Renaissance time. And during your AI seminar in 2023, you said pray to God for guidance. That one thing started getting me. So if you say that at your seminars, you might be really changing lives for the better in that way. Because then I started doing that more often, and it worked like crazy. I even said it at AMN in September of 2024. You were asking, how do you guys get your good employees? And I said, I raised my hand and I said, well, I pray to Jesus, and that's people have literally came when I do that. Like I've had situations where I pray. There was one with this older gentleman, Pat. Uh, I prayed. I said, man, it'd be really nice to have someone that was just so experienced with tree work. 10 minutes later, this guy calls. He's 77 years old. He's like 40 years or, yeah, 40 years of experience in the tree industry within 10 minutes. So I have these experiences all the time. Uh, and not everyone does. And I respect that. I respect that not everyone has these experiences. And it's frustrating because maybe they want to believe, but it's hard for them to because they don't. But when you have so many experiences like that over and over and over, for me, it's impossible not to. But for others, it might be the total opposite of experience. And I wish that everybody would have those experiences, though, because it's really profound. I love it. I'm so grateful for it.
Tell me about your Chat GPT Jesus experiment.
Well, so I didn't want to ask mine because mine's pre-programmed with all the work I did with Scott Shang.
Yeah.
And I created so many GPTs with him. And I said, no, I don't want to ask that one because it's going to be more favorable. I want to ask the version of ChatGPT that you don't log into. That's just the base model version, right?
Oh, okay. Yep.
So I went back and forth because I'm just curious. It's not my mission to prove it and tell everyone they're wrong and be super judgmental and rude. That's not the goal at all. It's really just I just wonder about it, and I'm wondering because I started doing Bible study like you recommended. Was the movie called Strong as Steel? What was that called?
Oh, Stronger Than Steel, the Wayne Alderson story. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a obscure little gem.
Yeah, you told me about that. I started doing Bible study too after meeting with you in December of 2024. So again, you're in this
Hmm.
for me. Like 2023 AI conference, I start praying more. Then you recommend, hey, you should do Bible study. So I did that with another staff member. And yeah, we still need to watch Stronger Than Steel. And but what you were asking about this relates because I started doing this Bible study
Well,
and it
the
relates to what you were just saying.
yeah,
I want to tie
yeah.
it back
Well,
in.
so yeah, you started asking ChatGPT
Yes.
to
Yeah.
evaluate
Yeah.
historical questions about Jesus.
Well, I started to notice that all this stuff, there's these weird parallels that like, because we started with the Old Testament, and then I'm noticing that all this stuff happens, and so then I started wondering about what's the mathematics look like of all this. Like, what are the probability, what does the probability and statistics look like for all of these things perfectly aligning?
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure you've done a way deeper dive on the
Oh,
mathematics and all this and
oh
evolution
yeah,
2.0.
I
Uh,
have.
there's so many things that mathematically speaking, it's a very, very, very low percentage that Jesus is not who he said he is. There's a very high, I think there's a very high mathematical probability that he is. And I'm just looking through the lens of only math, not how you feel, not near death experience, none of that. Now, what we could take into consideration is how many thousands or millions of people in the world and throughout history have had a near death experience and it's similar. We can take that into account with the math. But I
Yeah.
just got really intrigued by what does this look like mathematically, and so I just kept going back and forth with ChatGPT until it, because you kind of have to press it, and it was like, look, if I was human, there's probably a 90% chance I'd believe based on all of the information that I have, and it has a lot of information. So, because I was just curious about, because it has all this information, so based on all the data, and I was really surprised about that. Like, and it said, "Well, wait, time out." You said if I had to choose, right, in that conversation, but it's an abnormally high percent that it gives you with the probability when you go back and forth with it.
Well, people get very emotional and very polarized very quickly when you bring this stuff up. And so it's often hard to get people to just try to be factual and objective about it, if you will.
Sure.
But there is a significant department in Christianity that is called apologetics, which is it's kind of like the propeller head math geek wing, where people ask questions like, okay, so, is the Bible really historical? And did Jesus really live? And what's the chances that the resurrection of Jesus actually happened? And, was Jesus really crucified? And were there really 12 disciples? And did a person like David or Solomon exist? Like all of these questions. And I think most people are not aware that if this is all just made up by Constantine in 300 AD and it was myths piled up on top of myths, piled on top of myths, this would have never lasted 2,000 years. It's way more robust than a lot of people think. And why you can't prove these things, you can provide very substantial, reasonable evidence. I mean, there's libraries of books written about this stuff. And so so you sent me a link to your whole ChatGPT chat, and my interpretation of what I read. So when I read that conversation you had with ChatGPT, basically, you had tried to get the most neutral version of ChatGPT that you could find, like not your own account, and then
Yes.
ask it factual, objective questions. And you were asking it, so if you were an objective person impartially weighing the evidence, would you find the evidence for Christianity to be persuasive? And it basically said yes. Well, my interpretation of that is that's because the evidence, if looked at objectively, is strong. And what people are really struggling with has nothing to do with facts or evidence or data or whether miracles exist or all of these kind of philosophical questions. It really comes down to things like, do I feel condemned? Do I feel guilty? Do I feel ashamed? Am I afraid I'm going to have to give up a bunch of bad habits? Am I afraid people are going to judge me? Am I going to ruin my life? Am I going to be like become one of them where like one of those people is like, I do not like those people. I don't like the way they behave. I don't, I
Yeah.
don't like their politics or whatever. And I just felt like you were trying to get past all of that.
Yeah.
And like if you look around my library and look at all these books, I've got a whole bunch of books about this kind of stuff, and I've gone down the rabbit hole. And yeah, Christianity and Judaism do stand up. These are historical religions. There are there are elements of myth and saga that you can't necessarily nail down very well, but there's a lot of the history that you can nail down very well. And it is perfectly reasonable for a person to believe that Jesus was the Son of God and he rose from the dead. And that if you pass into the next life, that you're going to have an experience with this being. So I just thought it was really funny. I don't remember who told me about your story. It might have been my daughter, but somebody, Anthony had a near death experience. I'm like, oh, well, I got to talk to him about this.
You know what? David Charleston probably,
Oh, okay.
which I need to work. He's also profound.
Yes, he is.
Like wow. Like you can feel the energy from this guy
Yes.
like a mile away.
Yes.
And I'm telling him this, and he is like the sweetest. He's the nicest guy.
Yeah.
I actually need to talk with him again because we've worked with him too as an advisor, and one of the things I was telling him about it, and he's like, absolutely. And one of the things that during this chat, yeah, it's 23 pages long. It said one of the things I said that I thought was really interesting. Dismissal is irrational. Dismissal of Jesus is irrational. It said mathematically irrational. I did another conversation last night, this time with mine. It said denying Jesus as the Son of God requires believing in more improbable assumptions than accepting him.
I agree. And I'll give you a couple of examples of this that I think are important. In the Old Testament, there's a very famous passage called Isaiah 53. There's a lot of that passage that's sung in the Hallelujah chorus in the Messiah by Handel, and it describes the crucifixion of Jesus. And I think Isaiah was 700 BC when this was allegedly written. Well, when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls about 80 years ago, Isaiah 53 was in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and there's no question that those scrolls were written about 200 BC. So prior to the Dead Sea Scrolls, there were skeptics that said, oh, the only reason that's so accurate is because it was written after the fact and they just added it later.
Mm.
But the point being that no, Isaiah 53, which is a vivid description of the suffering of Christ, it was written well before Christ, and that Christ checked a whole bunch of boxes that had been prophesied. Or here's another one that is very rarely talked about. I think is really interesting. So there are lots of scholars who insist that the New Testament was written in the late first century, like 80 AD, 90 AD. In other words, 50, 60 years after the time of Christ. And that this is why they knew that Jerusalem was going to be destroyed, for example, because it had already been destroyed. Because Jesus prophesies in the New Testament that the temple is going to be destroyed and that not one brick will be left upon another. Well, if you study the way foreshadowing is handled in the New Testament. There's a really interesting comparison that you can do. So in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, every time Judas' name is mentioned, Judas is the guy who betrayed Jesus. They
Hmm.
always say, Judas, who later betrayed Jesus, said blah, blah, blah. Judas, who later betrayed Jesus, did blah, blah, blah. Every time they mention Judas, they mention, of course, later he betrayed Jesus. Every time they talk about the temple, they never say the temple that was later completely demolished. They never say Jerusalem, which was later completely demolished. So this is like if a person said, oh, this book about Hiroshima was written after Hiroshima was blown up. Well, if you wrote about Hiroshima after the nuclear bomb blew up Hiroshima, you would always talk about the nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
But and the destruction of Jerusalem was just as bad as a nuclear bomb. It obliterated the nation of Israel for 1900 years. But the New Testament, none of the four gospels in the New Testament ever explicitly refer to a destruction of Jerusalem. That means all four gospels were written before 70 AD, which is the year that Jerusalem was destroyed. Well, so why is that important? Well, if you know that a history was written, a history of stuff that happened in 30 to 35 AD was written before 70, then you know it was within the memory of lots of people who were around who could either say, yes, that happened, or no, that didn't happen. There's no book where some person who lived at the time says, no, that's not what happened. It really happened like this. And the four gospels are pretty consistent. And so what that tells you is that it was a history that was recorded in a reasonable amount of time by the people who lived at the time. And then you can examine all the internal evidence of all the, they refer to each other and the cities that they talk about and the landscapes that they talk about. And so there is something very much to be taken seriously here. And I like the way that you bring these together. Like this just all popped up into my awareness in the last week or two that I don't know, a couple of conversations about Anthony combined with you decided to send me your ChatGPT thread. It's like, well, there's this completely subjective experiential thing that you had happen. And then there is your pursuit of objective historical facts, and they actually line up. And this is what I would expect to happen if the Christ story is really true.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm so curious too, because I know you max out the AI with you because you go so deep on all this Pythagoras theorem
Right.
mathematically. I want to keep going deeper and deeper with this because I want to figure out how many things mathematically are going on in the Bible. Like you just said, how many situations are going on? Because I think that math is also a universal language, and
Mm-hmm.
that there's math going on here too that you can look into, like you just said. And I wonder how many instances of this there are. And it's interesting to talk with AI about it because it knows all of this.
Right. Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that because as anybody who's a heavy AI user knows, yeah, these chat engines have access to the entire internet. And these things have been heavily discussed in lots of places and lots of books and lots of discussion forums. And, some of that is just petty bickering and arguing, but some of it is very serious scholarship. And so I don't have any good reason to believe that the people that run ChatGPT would bias it to towards Christianity. That doesn't seem like the cool thing in Silicon Valley these days.
No, it's all very, yeah, yeah, cut and
And
dry.
but when there's enough history and enough material out there, and Alex O'Connor is a famous internet skeptic, and he went down a similar rabbit trail, except he asked questions more like, what's the probability that the classic arguments for the existence of God are valid, like based on the laws of cause and effect? And ChatGPT said, well, it appears to be inevitable that there necessarily had to be a first cause that was not caused by anything. Like there has to be a first event that is a different kind of an event than all of the ones that happen after. Like you have to have a 0 point that starts the universe, and it couldn't have come from nothing. Well, a lot of religious people just consider this to be common sense. Well, apparently ChatGPT thinks it's common sense too. Like, yeah, I think it's perfectly logical to believe something like that. But again, most people are actually very, very emotional about these things. And then, well, okay, so you're experiencing a really strong emotion, or you're getting triggered by this conversation. Why? What is it that you're afraid of? Are you afraid that God might have a claim on your life? I think a lot of people are afraid of that.
Yeah.
So I just think there's some honesty here that's really refreshing. And it doesn't guarantee that Christianity is true, but it's never, I've never felt like my job was to prove this and then like arm wrestle people. I mean, I used to
Exactly.
try to do that a really long time ago, but I feel like I outgrew that. I think people need to freely come to their own conclusions and not be afraid.
I completely agree. In another chat I had with another business partner about this, and he doesn't believe, but I showed him Pascal's wager, and we read all about Pascal's wager and like the math, and you already know this very well. And he said, okay, that makes me want to believe. He's like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna just say I believe because of a math chart here.
Yeah.
But this makes me want to, though. He's like, but I'm not going to lie to you and just say, like, it has to really be a belief. It can't, that makes sense. He's like, that is sound logic. It is in my best interest to believe. But
Yeah.
now, so we were talking and we said, so the best thing you could probably do is be open to it then at that point, because if you're not totally closed off, then Jesus can come into your life. But if you're, I mean, Jesus could probably come into your life no matter what, but it seems from my limited life experience so far that Jesus comes into your life more if you're open. If you say, okay, I'm open.
Well,
And
for those
yeah,
who aren't familiar with Pascal's wager, Pascal was about 400 years ago, absolutely brilliant guy, like one of the most brilliant people in the last 1,000 years. And he said, well, if you're a betting man and you got two bets, bet number one, there is no afterlife, there is no accountability, you don't answer to God at the end of your life. Or option two is God might exist. And if God exists, then you're morally accountable and then you will answer for how you lived your life. Is he said, if you're a betting man, the smarter bet is to assume that there's a God and there's an afterlife, because like the consequences for being right or the consequences of being wrong, they're kind of asymmetrical. And really, like if you're buying insurance policy, let's say, if you're an actuary, you would go with let's go with believe in God. And that's been criticized by a lot of people as, oh, that's a really cheesy thing. Well, there's a wrong version of it, which is that you're just going to roll over to the guy who's got the worst version of hell that he's going to tell you about. Like,
Mm,
that's the weak way of applying it. And I think what you're saying, Anthony, is this isn't really a actuarial decision that you make as though you were some insurance company.
yeah,
This is a heart decision about how you choose to live your life, which I think what you're saying, Anthony, is this is how God wants people to relate to God, not like cowering fear or my arithmetic tables told me that I should choose God. Like that's just not
right.
biology.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're a non-believer, and the best thing you can do, in my humble opinion, is be open to it. And if you are, great. If you really are, but just being open to it is the next best thing. I think that's the conclusion. I think I've been drawn to here.
And you can open up the question. You can say, okay, God, if you're there, I'm listening. And and then you just switch on your reticular activating system and
Bingo.
you say, if there's a message out there that I am supposed to be getting, I want to get it.
Yes.
My experience personally and of many people that I know is that's the first real step.
Yes. Yeah. You said if you want to do like mission type work, even if it's just donating to any cause, you told me in December of 2024, if you're open to it, you said, if you say you're open to it and want to, the work will find you.
Yeah.
If
Right.
you're open to Jesus, Jesus will find you, meet you where you are. Um, and yeah, that was the conclusion, that if I'm talking with people about this, is my hope is, that people can be open to it without. I'm not a big push. I don't like to push people too much on it, because it's just like sales. You can actually push someone further away if you're too pushy about it.
Well, to put a cherry on the sundae and kind of wrap things up here, what I love about what you said the most is that you said, I'm less judgmental. And, there's, I think one of the reasons people are a little jumpy about God is we all know we've all done things that we're terribly ashamed of,
Hmm.
all of us. And we're all afraid of being confronted about that. And if people could somehow get the idea that God is actually the least judgmental being that you have ever met. Are you sure about that? Well, try it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I just love that that is what you took away from your experience more than anything.
yeah. Because I thought maybe, if you'd have told me I'd have that experience before I had it, I would. You'd think, oh, maybe I'd come out of that being like, you know, wanting to be righteous and convert everyone or whatever. And really, it just gave me way more grace and understanding for everyone. Maybe some people would perceive that as too much. I don't know, but that's where I am with it. So
Well, this has been great. I really
yeah.
appreciate you being willing to share your story and tell about that. It's vulnerable and not everybody wants to go out in public and tell this kind of a story. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate you so much, Perry. Thank you for everything, and hope to see you soon.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
And I'll send you these recordings and we can decide what we want to do with them. Okay.
Okay. That sounds great.
All right, Anthony.
All right. Have a nice weekend.